Hi again guys, and welcome to another installment of lap breakdowns or circuit strategies or whatever you want to call it. You get the idea. It's where we take a look at a track and give you more of a backstory into the circuit, give you more of an idea how to take on the track in a time trial, in an endurance race, in a Nations Cup event. It could be anything, because the more comfortable you are and the more knowledgeable you are about something, including a racetrack, the better you will become at it. And of course, each episode is about a different circuit because you can pick and choose which tracks you want to be more proficient at or which track you need to be more proficient at. Now, as far as proficiency goes and difficulty, I would not rank Suzuka as being a particularly difficult circuit. It's a very forgiving track, it's all about the high-speed flow, and it suits everything from road cars all the way up to Grand Prix. It incidentally has been the host of the Japanese Grand Prix since 1987. It was originally founded in the early 60s by Mr. Honda, of all people, originally planned to be a Honda test course, but of course it ended up being a lot more than that. You got Super GT, Formula cars, a wide variety of other things, and in the game you will often see everything from N100 all the way up to Group 1 racing here, and it's a fantastic track for all of them. It's only 3.6 miles long, or 5.8 kilometers, and in terms of the corners, there are 18 of them officially, but some of them are actually grouped together, such as the S curves, the Casio triangle at the end, and also the spoon curve at the far end of the track. So as far as the actual lap breakdown for Suzuka, we'll probably slow down the footage a little bit. I'm going to use a Group 4 Volkswagen Scirocco, and then after I've done the slowed down lap, I'll do it in real time so that you can see all of the things that I've said actually being put into action. So the first and second corner, which are of course 1 and 2, are technically put together as the first turn, as it's called, and that is interestingly exactly how you should treat it, because although technically it's 2 corners, you should try to take this corner as one. Keep the car nice and wide, brake before you enter the corner, and then if necessary smoothly as you enter the corner. Allow the car to drift out a little bit wider and keep essentially that one big horseshoe curve through both turns. Treating it as one big hairpin is a far more efficient way of getting through the corner quickly. Then as far as 3 through 7, these are grouped together into the S curves, probably the most famous section of Suzuka in terms of when you think of the track, at least for me, and these are all about the average speed. If you try to push the car too fast, you'll often find that you'll end up slower because you go wider and wider and wider, because the exact style of corner really that this is a slalom, and you should treat it like a slalom. Average speed will win the day. Don't go too fast, don't go too slow, don't be constantly braking if at all possible. Try to use throttle control more than your brake if at all possible. Next up then, between corners 7 and 8, we have the Dunlop curve, which of course is a long, sweeping, kind of multi-mini corner left put together, maybe 3 or 4 very small turns. It's a pretty simple one to do, but then coming up to the Degner curve, which is 8, leading directly into corner 9, this is where you need to brake early and try to not so much cut the grass, but just cut across the apex of the corner, if you will. Use those little rumble strips to your advantage, and the key with 8 and 9 corners are slow in, fast out. As the cliche goes, it really does work here. Now, as far as the next corners, 10 and 11, 10 leads directly into the 11 hairpin, and the hairpin is the slowest corner on the whole course by far. You have to get so slow, cut across corner 10, slow right down as soon as you see the rumble strips, at least in this car, and then sweep in. Try to cut around the corner as tight as you can, and don't give it too much throttle until the car is straight enough to have a good trajectory out of the corner. The next corner is number 12. This is a very, very long right-hander. The key here, keep it as close to the right hand of the track as possible. Keep it nice and smooth, don't clip the grass too much, and then that brings you up into the spoon curve. This is 13 and 14. And the funny thing about this corner is it's almost a mirror image of the first 2 turns, but turned the other way, just like corners 1 and 2 were for a right-hand turn. So in a very similar way, you should try to treat this as one big corner. Now, it's not quite as easy to do that as with the first 2 turns, because for one thing, this corner is larger. However, if you get it smooth, it makes a massive difference. In fact, arguably more of a difference than the first 2, because of the straight. And if you can get onto that straight smoother and quicker, it makes all the difference. Next up then we have one of my personal favourite corners on the whole track, maybe even my favourite corner actually, 15. It's a very small, very sharp kink to the left. It's deceptively simple. Just back off the throttle a little bit, cut in across the corner, not across the grass of course, but across the corner, and then power out. And it's deceptive. You can easily lose a lot of time on that curve as well. Then that brings you up into the last section, another compound section on the circuit, 16, 17 and 18, which together make up the Casio triangle. Don't rush. That's the biggest piece of advice I would give you here. Brake nice and early, if anything a little bit earlier than you think you might need to. Sweep in across 16, then cut around 17 nice and sharp and power out through 18. You've got that long, nice right-hand curve, and as far as the end, I would actually recommend keeping the car on the right, because the start-finish line, it can shave a couple of hundredths of a second off your lap, or off of your, or add it to your lead in other words, if you keep the car nice and tight to the corner, instead of going really wide around it. And of course, lap after lap, those kind of time differences do just that, they make a big difference. So that's it for the actual lap breakdown. As I said, it's not the most challenging of circuits as far as I'm concerned, but it's one that if you do put the time and the practice into it, you can see great results. And of course, recently, if you follow my online exploits in sport mode, I did an episode where I raced the Beetle in Group 3 on this track and had a lot of success back to back. So if you do get good on this track, or if you are already good, doubtless you'll have seen, you can get a lot of experience, you can get a lot of benefit out of Suzuka because it's a very quick track, it's a very easy track once you get to know it, and also it's a track which has multiple points that can catch out people. Corner 15, for instance, corner 8 and 9, and I would say probably the most challenging corner for me personally, the corner that I tend to sometimes go a little bit too slow around, is the hairpin. Corner number 11, because it's just such an easy corner to get wrong. If you enter it braking a little bit too early, you can cut in too early and end up losing time there. If you go in too fast, obviously you'll end up in the sand. It's just an easy corner for me personally to generally undershoot by braking a little bit too early, if anything. But overall, that's it for the lap breakdown. What about in terms of bad drivers? Well, this is a track where bad drivers can exploit it for sure. In particular, the Degner curve that I mentioned, 8 and 9, you can easily cut across those curbs. You can easily cut across corner 15, my personal favourite one. And of course, at the end of the lap with the Casio triangle, you can very easily cut straight across those with minimal effort. So you do need to be careful to some degree of bad drivers. Of course, in sport mode, they're going to have penalties for that kind of thing, so it doesn't really worry you too much. It doesn't really benefit them either. But in terms of a lobby, for instance, I would recommend being the most careful at the Casio triangle, right at the end, corner 16, 17 and 18, because even if somebody isn't trying to cut the corner, sometimes they might brake too late and end up going straight into the back of you, which in turn pushes you straight off the track and straight into the barricade. So it's easy to be put off your game on Suzuka. So a piece of advice that I would give if you are racing here is focus on yourself. And of course that goes for any track, but with Suzuka I really would say that's important, because you'll find that if you are a smooth, good driver, let's say, you'll find the gap between yourself and the next car just naturally increases. It's not the kind of track which offers the same kind of competitive nature that, for instance, something like the Nürburgring or Monaco does, where it's really tight, very close quarters, can barely overtake kind of stuff. It's more open, it's more smooth, it's got long flowing corners and higher average speeds, so it's more fun, I think, from that point of view. And also that's one of the reasons why it lends itself more toward road cars, as well as just race cars. So you can have some great racing here. As far as counteracting bad drivers, well, once again, if you think that somebody is bearing down on you, it's actually a good track for that, because if you brake and get out of their way quick, this track has a lot of runoff. There is a lot of grass and a lot of sand. So if somebody's trying to wipe you out, just pull to the side, brake heavily and let them go straight past you, and they will end up dug into the sand. It's a great track for that. It's a very punishing track as well for people who try to cheat, so use that to your advantage if you are trying to be, of course, a good driver. Overall, as far as endurance tips, well, again, it's a very smooth track, so it's not going to be usually too bad on tyres. The corners that you'll notice it will be in something like I'm driving, a front-wheel drive car, on corners like the hairpin, or for instance through the S curves. You'll notice once your tyres start going that the S-curves start to get more and more difficult, because the car will get wider and wider and you'll lose more and more time. So overall, my endurance tips here are actually fairly simple. Try not to be too harsh on the car, maybe sometimes allow it to coast through some of the corners even, especially 8, 9 and 15, where they're just those natural little kinks in the road. And overall, that's it for my advice, really, when it comes to Suzuka. So personally, I wouldn't put Suzuka as one of my favourite tracks, although ironically it does tend to be one of the tracks that I'm pretty good on, which is a funny dichotomy for me. But overall, if you do decide to race on Suzuka and use these tips and tricks, I hope of course you benefit from it, win some races, win many races in fact, and that's it overall. So if you haven't checked out my other lap breakdowns and lap guides, I would recommend clicking here on screen to see those, and for now, as always, thanks for watching.